Great. Well, thank you, Mark. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, I think my title is the essence of what my path has been. And
Mm,
what I really want to do is give you a little storyline of how I came to regenerative agriculture and other practices. My path started with a PhD program in psychology, which
mm,
sounds unlikely. But in this program, we were looking to heal community using psychology, theory, and practices. And some of the courses we had eco psychology, we had liberation psychology, and that's a particular note. That is looking at colonized, marginalized, and oppressed
mm,
populations,
mm,
where one group that's in power, that has more power, may overtake the resources, the land, the beliefs, and ways
mm,
of being of another group. As I was learning about this, as it happens sometimes, all I could think of, this is analogy to children in schools, where their natural ways of being, such as learning through play, use of imagination, free use of trial and error, those things are overtaken in an effort to create adults,
mm.
if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, so I decided to do a study. So I designed a research using students who had been to two different types of schooling. One was a holistic outdoor education-based system where there was a lot of self-reflection, so that
Mm,
development of an inner self. And I call it holistic as well because they're educating all aspects of the child. So it's the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, and the mental. All of these students went on to the public high school. So I asked them questions about their well-being at those four levels, and
mm,
then went on for an in-depth 1-hour interview with each. And the data came back strong. And what I like to call the findings are the 4 C's.
mm,
So care, am I loved and do I matter? Connection, do I feel in relationship with my peers and with my teachers? Community is, do I share values with a
mm,
tribe and do I have a feeling of belonging? And choice, what I like to think of is, can I express my uniqueness and my truth to power, as well as having a sense of agency around how I learn and what I learn? So when those 4 C's were present, students reported remembering what they learned.
mm,
There was self-motivation present, self-esteem was increased, and they enjoyed doing it. They became,
mm,
often reported, that created a lifelong learner in them. When those things weren't present, which was often the case at the public high school, there tended to be a sense of self-alienation, and they described it at times as miserable, and they called it memorize, barf back, and forget. So they don't remember what they learned, and it felt not relevant. As well, they needed sort of that carrot stick form of motivation in order to do that. Couple of unique things. One, there was one particular teacher that they all talked about that was the exception at the public school system.
mm,
And so he managed to, whether he knew it or not, enact the 4 C's. And he went by his first name. He was authentic. He made real connections with the students. They had a philosophy of what they were doing in this class. It was an environmental science class. And the point is that all kids saw him as an exception. So it can be practiced no matter the larger context. Another interesting fact was when I asked them, well, what's going on with teachers that they're not caring about you or connecting with you?
mm.
They all said, oh, it's not their fault. They're stressed out, outnumbered, and overwhelmed. And I just was amazed. First of all, these are young people with empathy for their teachers.
Yeah.
And they saw what was going on.
Mm.
They know what's going on.
Mm.
So this really fascinated me. So I went on and designed, once my dissertation was done, I went on and designed a large research project, teacher well-being in the school
Oh.
district, interviewing and asking questions of teachers about those 4 aspects of self as well, and the holistic teacher. And come to find out, they too were looking for the 4 C's. They wanted to feel valued and cared about, not just on campus, but also in society. They feel a little not recognized for what they do at times. And when they do feel recognized, it makes all the difference. Connection, they were looking particularly with their admin. They really were wanting that connection, but also their peer groups within their subject areas. And they had a lot of connection with students, and in some cases, parents as well. Now, there was a lot of interesting findings that I'm not going to be able to get into here, but needless to say, it was fascinating. And one of the main issues that they saw, I offered them a question: if you had a magic wand, what would you change? And first of all, I noticed teachers had a hard time using imagination and magic wand. They might,
Really?
given that classrooms are too full, what would you do? Oh, well, I'd love it if just 2 fewer students. It's like, the thing's magic, you can do more with it.
Right.
Oh, well, so they had, their own imagination had been narrowed and shut down. But then I went on and I also did an administrative interview set.
So the same, so
And
with the students, the teachers, and then management.
yeah, that's right. And I planned to go on and do the district level, which I did not do. But what I started to see is that everybody is looking for those positive inputs. It's positive, affirming input, right? And then I saw how everyone's energy works together so that it's a form of an ecosystem. Schools are ecosystems where there are these inputs, there are these needs. And when it's not present, there is depletion, there is burnout, there is dropout. And there was even a thing with teachers that I found that's called moral distress disorder. I found it in the medical literature, where in this case, teachers know what the students need, and there are institutional barriers to them providing what they know the children need. And that causes its own form of burnout. And as we know, teachers have a very high dropout rate. It's about 50% in 5 years. So the fact is, I found that not only were the students colonized by aspects of the way we enact education, narrowing their natural sense of knowing that the right answer is outside them. They have to memorize a right answer. But teachers as well, they not only went through a school system that may have been colonizing to their sense of self, but they're also enacting it on children. And the system that they're working in is increasingly narrow, whereas it's becoming more standardized, more mechanized, more factory model in order to get this compliance and measurability and data driven. And a lot of teachers get into the field as a calling. So there's something of a calling for teachers.
Sure.
And it's also, I found it's an art, because I really went into this not knowing a lot about it. It was really an open question for me. So what I found was, when there was the presence of the 4 C's again, it was positive and thriving, and learning happens, self-esteem is increased, all these kinds of things. When it's absent, there's depletion, there's burnout, there's lack of motivation. So this was the work I was doing until the IPCC on Black Friday in 2018 announced a big statistic around global warming. And it caught my attention. Everybody comes to the climate story at their own time.
Okay.
Mine was then, and I'm not proud to say it took that long. Of course, I'm aware of the environment, but that was when I thought I have to get involved. So I did. I became a climate activist and was working. I did.
So help me understand the bridge, because we were talking about education and kids and all this research. Yep. And then there's this thing. So help tie those two together for me.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. As I say, seeing schools as ecosystems,
sure.
I started to recognize there was such a thing as sustainability and regenerative quality to schools, because there are living things that a school consists of. And so it was curious to me, because I was only familiar with those concepts in land practices and other ways, but I saw it in school. But all of a sudden, I broadened my view and I started looking at the bigger picture. That's just what my path did.
So this work starts by you interviewing middle school kids after they've gotten into high school, correct?
After they were finished with high school.
After they're finished with high school.
Yes.
And you didn't have the 4 C's as a methodology, as a framework.
That was the result.
And that was the result. You're starting to hear these things, and you're crunching the data and analyzing it and trying to figure out with your conclusions to write your dissertation. And then you meet the teachers. Now you have the 4 C's in mind. And as you're listening, you're going, hold it. These are very similar. And so it's really not something that's unique to students. It feels like it's something unique to humans.
It felt like it was unique to humans. However, as I started to learn in climate activism, it's unique to living things. So living things work in cycles. And ecosystems. So yes, and that's where I started to go and what I was learning about. That was my next learning. I kind of built, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have to take this bigger out to the community. So as a psychologist, I was doing groups, helping people address psychological and emotional barriers to engaging with climate change, because so many people I knew that were doing so much good work in the world, they were not aware of or engaging climate work and climate change as a thing. So that's why I decided I needed to kind of speak out and get involved. But that work was interrupted by a near-death experience I had. I was released from ICU and I came home to the avocado ranch that I live on in Santa Barbara. We live on a farm. And as we came around the corner, I had an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude and awe and familiarity for this land. It was something completely unexpected. I'd never had that before, even though I've always loved this land. And then I spent a lot of time healing out in nature. So I was just drawn outside, and that is typical of people that have near-death experience. They experience an increased connection to nature, an increased sense of purpose and spirituality. And I did a lot of research on that as well, and I learned from an expert about that helped me understand what I might have been going through. So that was helpful.
So how, after that, did you go back to the schools to work with the schools, or to have any kind of conversations to say, I'm just really curious, did you feed back what you learned to anybody who could make a difference? I'm thinking of our county superintendent of schools. And how did that go?
So I've done teacher trainings. I spoke at the high schools and many times. I wrote a book about it called Listen to the Children. And I've been a board member at AHA for many, many years, and they used my research work to go in and do teacher peer groups that was sort of enacting some of the things that I had come up, the results that had come up with for the teachers. Because really what I believe is that outside help, parents, community needs to support teachers so they can, because they're the ones that work with the students. So they are the ones that can help with creating that environment in the classroom, but not if they aren't feeling supported, cared about, valuable.
Sure.
Yeah.
So this was pre-COVID.
Oh, sure was. And I want to say also is that I present every year at conferences on this material, but there's another book coming that's going to be about this. Yeah, because I really want to get it back out to the teachers and to the people that can do something, and parents, and those of us who have been through the school system that may have had, it can be experienced as complex trauma when your ways of being are violated over time. And it may sound funny and it may sound overstating it, but I literally had to do trauma work before I could complete my dissertation because of my own experience. And I wasn't beaten by nuns or anything.
Oh, good.
Like some
Stacy,
people
thanks for helping open our eyes
those are good
to all of
questions.
this.
Yeah.